Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking into some really powerful insights drawn from Bible text and, well, from scholars too.
That's right.
We want to understand these precursors to end-time events that we find in Bible prophecy.
Exactly. And the goal here really is to find those nuggets of knowledge, things that bring clarity and ultimately hope. We're looking at how history unfolds according to God's plan.
Yeah, hoping to draw closer to Jesus through that understanding.
Hmm.
So the plan today is pretty clear. We'll start with a foundational prophecy, sort of a blueprint for history.
Yeah, big overview.
Then we dive into a really powerful story, an ancient one that kind of prefigures the final crisis.
A precursor, yeah.
And finally, we'll tie all that together with what the book of Revelation says about the end times.
It sounds intense, maybe, but like you said, the point isn't fear. Understanding God's control, well, that brings incredible hope, actually.
Okay, so let's unpack this. When we talk about history and the end times, the Bible text and scholars really point us towards Daniel and Revelation. They have this amazing parallel relationship, don't they?
They absolutely do. And a really foundational piece is right there in Daniel chapter 2. You have King Nebuchadnezzar, ruler of Babylon.
Right.
And he has this dream, a really vivid, disturbing dream that he just can't shake. But he can't quite remember it either.
Ah, yeah, the classic tell me the dream and what it means scenario. So he calls in his wise men, the astrologers, magicians, the whole crew.
Exactly. And he puts this impossible demand on them. The Bible text really highlights their panic.
They basically admit defeat, right? They say nobody on earth can do this. It shows the limit of human wisdom trying to grasp divine things.
It really does. They were even planning to, kind of fake it, to lie to the king. It was their desperation. But they were wrong about it being impossible.
Because Daniel enters the picture, God gives him the answer.
Mm-hmm. Daniel, this captive, he prays, seeks God, and God reveals the whole thing, the dream, and its meaning.
And he's clear, isn't he? He tells the king, it's not me, it's God in heaven who reveals secrets.
Precisely. God's revelation, not human insight. And the dream itself. This huge, terrifying statue made of different materials.
Yeah, Daniel breaks it down. Head of gold.
Representing Babylon. Daniel says that directly to Nebuchadnezzar, you are this head of gold.
Babylon, the dominant empire then. But the statue doesn't stop there.
Nope. The prophecy continues. Breast and arms of silver, another kingdom inferior would arise. Scholars generally point to Media Persia.
Which conquered Babylon, just like the dream showed. Then the bronze.
Thighs of bronze. A third kingdom ruling over the earth. Understood as Greece under Alexander the Great, sweeping through.
And after Greece, the legs of iron. Strong, crushing everything.
Right. And the historicist view, which is a major approach scholars discuss, identifies this really strongly with Rome. Its military might, its dominance.
Yeah.
It fits that description.
Okay, but then it gets, well, even more relevant for us today, right? The feet.
Exactly. The feet weren't solid iron. They were iron mixed with clay. Daniel explains, this means the kingdom Rome would be divided.
It wouldn't hold together. They shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay.
And that's where, scholars following this historicist line see the breakup of the Roman Empire, the emergence of modern European nations.
Yeah, attempts to unite through marriage, alliances, even war, but never achieving that lasting unified strength of the earlier empires.
History really seems to bear that out, doesn't it? Europe, since Rome's fall, it's been this collection of nations, often clashing, never fully united like Babylon or Rome was.
So this single dream lays out this incredible sweep of history: Babylon, Media Persia, Greece, Rome, and then its fragmented state, right down to our time.
It's a powerful blueprint, and this historicist way of reading prophecy, seeing it unfold continuously through history, well, scholars note it has deep roots.
Yeah, even before Christianity. You mentioned Josephus identifying the fourth kingdom as Rome.
Right, and early church figures like Irenaeus, Tertullian, Clement of Alexandria, they largely saw it the same way. Rome, then its breakup, represented by the feet.
It's interesting, though, that other ways of interpreting these prophecies came about later. Futurism, preterism.
Mm-hmm. Different schools of thought. Futurism sees a lot of it happening way off in the future. Preterism sees much of it already fulfilled in the past, often around the time of the early church or the fall of Jerusalem.
And the sources mention some of these views were developed during the Counter-Reformation, perhaps to challenge the historicist interpretations that were common among reformers.
Yeah, particularly interpretations identifying certain powers active during the Reformation era with prophetic symbols. It's important to just acknowledge these different scholarly approaches exist.
Yeah.
For this discussion, we're mostly following that historicist thread laid out in Daniel 2.
Okay, so that brings us to the feat of iron and clay, our time. But there's one more huge piece to that dream.
The climax, a stone. And the text is very specific, cut out without hands.
Meaning not by human power, divine origin.
Exactly. And this stone strikes the image on the feet, the iron and clay part, the divided, weaker part.
And it doesn't just damage it.
No, it pulverizes the whole thing. Gold, silver, bronze, iron, clay, all ground to dust, blown away like chaff. And then that stone becomes a huge mountain and fills the whole earth.
Wow. So bring that down to us, living in what Daniel described as the time of the feet. What's the big takeaway?
The big takeaway is huge. It means history isn't random chaos. There's a divine plan, a blueprint. God is involved. He sets up kingdoms. He takes them down. We are living in the final phase of human kingdoms described in this prophecy just before that stone strikes.
Which, honestly, seeing the world today, the instability, the divisions, nations trying to ally but not really sticking together, it sounds a lot like iron mixed with clay.
It really does. But
Makes sense.
seeing that, knowing we're in this specific time frame, according to the prophecy, well, it shouldn't cause fear. It should actually bring relief and hope.
Because the stone represents God's eternal kingdom, right?
Yes. Cut out without hands, replacing all earthly kingdoms. It tells us history is heading towards God's ultimate victory, not just disintegration. Jesus sees the mess, yes, but he's got it under control.
Like the Bible text tells the truth about the problems, but also says, I've got you. Our hope is in his control, his plan.
Exactly. That's the foundation from Daniel 2.
Okay, powerful stuff. Now let's shift to Daniel chapter 3. A different kind of story, but the sources frame it as a really striking precursor for end times.
Right. Moving from the big sweep of history to a specific intense event. So after Nebuchadnezzar gets his dream interpretation, what does he do? He seems to kind of react against it.
Yeah, he builds this enormous golden statue, like 90 feet high.
All gold. Maybe, as some scholars suggest, trying to make his kingdom, the gold head, last forever, defying the prophecy of succession.
And then comes the command.
The command. When the music plays, everyone has to bow down and worship this golden image.
Or else.
Or else you get thrown into a blazing fiery furnace. Immediate death penalty.
Wow. And that sounds incredibly familiar when you think about Revelation.
Doesn't it? It echoes Revelation 13 so strongly. An image, a command to worship, severe penalties for not complying, economic pressure, even death threats.
It's like an ancient preview of that final test of loyalty. And then you have the heroes of the story.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel's friends, also captives. The music plays, everyone bows, except them. They stand firm.
They get reported, dragged before the furious king, and their answer is just legendary.
It really is. They basically say, look, king, our God can save us from your furnace. But even if he doesn't,
We still won't worship your gods or this golden image.
incredible faith,
Yeah.
uncompromising loyalty. They chose obedience to God's commandment, no other gods, no bowing to idols over their own lives. Fear didn't dictate their actions. Faithfulness did.
It's a masterclass, really, in what true worship means. Total allegiance to God, regardless of the cost.
Exactly. And that, listen, worship demanding absolute loyalty, even under extreme pressure. That's the direct link the sources make to the end-time crisis.
Okay, let's make that connection explicit. Revelation 13. How does that fiery furnace story relate?
Well, Revelation 13 describes this future global power, or powers, setting up an image to the beast and demanding worship, enforcing compliance with a mark.
Right. Similar structure. Worship mandate, severe consequences for refusal, can't buy or sell, threat of death. It mirrors Daniel 3's pressure points.
It absolutely does. The core issue is the same. Who do you obey? Who gets your ultimate allegiance? It's a global test focused squarely on worship.
It's not just symbols, it's a real choice humanity will face.
A definitive choice. But Revelation doesn't leave us there in chapter 13's crisis. It immediately moves to Revelation 4:2.
Which shows God's response, right? His
Right.
final message and his faithful people.
Exactly. Verses 1 to 5 describe the 144,000, those who stand firm with the Lamb, Jesus. And then verses 6-12 lay out God's final warning message to the entire world.
Proclaim to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people.
And notice the contrast. Revelation 13 demands worship of the beast and its image. Revelation 14.7 calls out with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to him, and worship him who made heaven and earth, the sea and springs of water."
A direct call to worship the Creator God.
And right after that, Verses 9 and 10 warn against worshiping the beast in his image, against receiving his mark.
So the final dividing line is crystal clear. Worship the Creator or worship the beast power.
That's the ultimate issue.
Which brings us back to the practical question, echoing Daniel 3. How do we make sure we're on the side of worshiping the Creator? How do we avoid the deception of the beast's mark?
And the Bible gives a remarkable clear answer right there in Revelation 14, verse 12. It describes God's faithful people, the saints, who endure this time. It says, "Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus."
There it is, keeping God's commandments and having the faith of Jesus. It's the same core principle we saw with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego loyalty expressed through obedience driven by faith.
Exactly. That's presented as the identifying characteristic, the distinguishing feature of God's people in the very end. It stands in direct opposition to receiving the mark of the beast.
So it's like God's seal. Loyalty shown through faith that leads to obedience.
You could say that. It's the evidence of who they belong to. They trust Jesus completely. And that trust naturally leads them to follow his ways, his commandments, even when it's incredibly difficult. That final test of loyalty, centered on worship and obeying God's law against intense pressure, it really is the ultimate fulfillment of what we saw prefigured way back in Daniel 3.
So, wrapping this up, thinking about Daniel 2's blueprint, Daniel 3's loyalty test, and Revelation's final crisis, what's the main feeling we should have? It can sound overwhelming.
I think the main feeling should be hope, grounded in understanding. Yes, the Bible is honest about challenges ahead, but seeing God's plan laid out, seeing he told us these things in advance, it shows he's in control. He has a plan not just for history, but for deliverance.
And we see little previews of that deliverance too, don't we? Like Peter getting sprung from prison in Acts 12.
That's a fantastic example. Peter's facing execution, chained between soldiers, seemingly no way out. But the church prays, God sends an angel and walks him right out.
It shows God's people can be faithful under pressure, trusting him even when things look impossible.
Right. Whether it's a fiery furnace, a Roman prison, or the final crisis described in Revelation, the principle is the same. Trust God, stay loyal, he has the power to deliver. He tells us the truth, the hard truth sometimes, but always with that underlying promise, I've got you. Our hope isn't in avoiding trouble, it's in his control through it all.
So we've covered a lot, Daniel 2's historical map, Daniel 3's preview of the worship test, and how it all points to Revelation 13 and 14, the final choice, and God's faithful, commandment-keeping people. Understanding this really does bring clarity, doesn't it? And hopefully strengthens our faith walk with Jesus.
Absolutely. And there's always more to explore. We really encourage you to, dig deeper into these Bible texts yourself. Check out the bonus and supplemental explorations available too. They can definitely add more layers to this.
Yeah, definitely do that. And speaking of digging deeper, next time we're heading back to Daniel chapter 5, another incredibly dramatic story, the writing on the wall. Talk about a faith-building account of God's sovereignty and accountability.
Oh, that's a powerful one.
Yeah.
So as you reflect on today's discussion, history's path, loyalty under pressure, the final worship test, maybe just consider this question personally. What is that kind of uncompromising loyalty to God, the kind we saw in Daniel 3? What does that look like in my life right here, right now, as we see prophecy unfolding and approach that final test?
Right.